is Red Leader. Stay close and watch for enemy fighters.
The Alliance to Restore the Republic, better known as the Rebel Alliance, had finally begun to make progress in their war with the Galactic Empire. Thanks to their improved ability to coordinate operations across the galaxy, the Rebels had become an effective thorn in the side of the seemingly monolithic Imperial Navy. In addition, the recent defection of several designers and engineers from the Incom Corporation had given the Alliance a starfighter that was arguably unmatched on the galactic stage. This craft was, of course, the legendary X-Wing Space Superiority Fighter. The X-Wing originally debuted during the Battle of Turkana, where a rebel fleet was ambushed by an Imperial Star Destroyer group over the planet of the same name. There, the X-Wings played a pivotal role in blunting the Imperial offensive and actually forced the Star Destroyers into retreating. But while the rebels celebrated their win, the Imperial Navy leadership took stock. The Battle of Turkana was the final straw that broke the camel's back. The Rebel Alliance had now elevated themselves to being a credible threat to Imperial operations throughout the galaxy. Then Captain Firmus Piet, commander of the Imperial Star Destroyer Accuser, and participant in the Battle of Turkana, wrote an after-action mission report that emphasized how the X-Wing was not to be underestimated. Piet's main recommendation to his superiors, besides more effective anti-starfighter countermeasures, was a coordinated military campaign against the rebels that he personally would lead. This proposal of his was filed under NFOP-TBM-11891, or better known by its more marketable name, Operation Strike Fear. In the meantime, the Alliance had continued its raids against the Empire, and even found further success with another fighter recently added to their arsenal, the A-Wing Interceptor. But High Command knew better than to grow overconfident. The Battle of Turkana was a black eye for the Empire, and a reprisal would be almost guaranteed. These fears would be confirmed during a standard hit-and-fade operation on an Imperial supply convoy. The captain of the Corellian corvette, acting as escort to said convoy, broadcasted his intention to defect to the Rebel Alliance, claiming he had information they could use. After the rebels finished with the rest of the convoy, the captain was brought in and interrogated. What he revealed was that a large gathering of Imperial capital ships was going to assemble in the Dalalt system for an operation in the sector very soon. When the system was subsequently investigated by an A-Wing scout, the captain's claims were proven true. A fleet led by the Star Destroyer Invincible was found, which could only mean one thing: the Empire really was gearing up for a prolonged campaign in the sector. When corroborated with recently acquired intelligence reports, the conclusion High Command came to was easy. This was the start of the counterattack they feared. The first priority was to abandon their main base of operations in a system called Brigia. While the base had already been in the process of being evacuated earlier as a precaution, the imminent threat of Imperial retaliation forced the Alliance to sharply readjust their timetable. As events unfolded, it was a prudent move. As the last ships were leaving Brigia and preparing to hyperspace out, the Star Destroyer Invincible jumped in and began attacking the fleeing rebels. In a pitched battle, the rebel starfighters were able to hold off the Imperial TIE fighters long enough for at least half the convoy to escape to hyperspace. But the Rebel Alliance could not breathe a sigh of relief just yet. Not long after the Battle of Brigia, Imperial Star Destroyers found the new main base at Orion IV. Unfortunately, with no prior warning, the Imperials caught the rebels off guard and proceeded to bombard the planet from orbit with their turbo lasers, followed by a ground invasion using AT-ATs and stormtroopers. The results were devastating. The base was all but annihilated, and the Empire came away with many rebel prisoners who would suffer the tender mercies of Imperial interrogators. With the loss of Orion IV, High Command were forced to relocate their main base of operations to Dantooine, another remote planet in the Outer Rim. But as they began their preparations for yet another exodus, a critical opportunity had presented itself. The recent offenses by the Operation Strike Fear Task Force had left the Imperials low on supplies and equipment. and thus had ordered a resupply convoy from Imperial Command in order to continue the campaign against the Rebel Alliance. In the meantime, the task force would be forced to suspend any further operations until this convoy would reach them. Realizing this was a chance to effectively handicap their Imperial pursuers, the Rebel leadership ordered an offensive strike against this resupply convoy en route to the Star Destroyer Invincible. 2 X-Wings from Red Squadron, followed by 2 Y-Wings from Gold Squadron, would be assigned to this critical hit-and-fade strike. The plan was to have the X-Wings jump into the area of operations first to distract the TIE Starfighter escorts. About a minute later, the Y-Wings would jump in from the other side of the convoy and proceed to wipe out the freighters. Now, this was a standard pincer move that most military academies would tell their students to watch out for in the field. But in this case, it worked phenomenally against the Imperials as the Rebel starfighters and bombers were able to deny the Invincible the means to replenish their war materiel. Since Operation Strike Fear had been seriously impeded by the recent Hit and Fade attack, the Rebel Alliance could turn their attentions to a potential ally that could help their war efforts against the Empire significantly: the Sullustans. The Sullustans were a race of humanoids that originated on the planet Sullust. They were renowned throughout the galaxy for their navigational abilities in both sublight and hyperspace environments, making them exceptional pilots and navigators. Given the continually mobile nature of the Alliance, bringing the Sullustans into the fold was seen as a high priority. However, the Sullustans had continually refused to join the Alliance, as the ruling governmental body of Sullust, the Sorosub Corporation, had long since openly declared their allegiance to the Empire. In normal circumstances, that would have been the end of that, and the Alliance would have been forced to find other potential allies. But the oppressive policies of both the Sorosub and the Empire, in addition to the overall deteriorating working conditions and open enslavement of their people, had led to a thriving resistance movement. It was this group that the Alliance was seeking to establish relations with. However, these Sullustan rebels had also repeatedly refused the Alliance's offers, due to the fear of being recognized as a large enough threat that provoked the Galactic Empire into a direct military response. This state of affairs would soon change when Alliance intelligence received reports that Imperial forces had captured select members of a technical staff group made up of Sullustans, and were in the process of shipping them out system from Sullust. Seemingly, another priceless opportunity had dropped itself into the Alliance's lap. If they could rescue the technical staff and return them to the Sullustan resistance, it could very well be the tipping point to convince them to begin negotiations to join the Rebel Alliance. High Command was correct in their assumptions. After a daring smash-and-grab operation by Rebel forces, they were able to find the technical staff and return them to the Sullustans. The Resistance was so grateful for this feat that they soon began diplomatic talks to join the Alliance. But the Imperials had somehow caught wind of the resulting diplomatic summit, and the Star Destroyer Invincible ambushed the meeting at a critical point in the negotiations, while both the Sullustans and Rebels were able to wrap up their meeting and escape. This attack by the Invincible turned out to be nothing but a feint, to cover for the real mission, the capture of the Sullustan resistance leader, Sion Tev. Working quickly, Rebel analysts determined the location of the Imperial shuttle carrying Sion Tev, and a rescue operation was successfully carried out right under the shadow of the Invincible herself. Another prize denied to her clutches by yet another daring Rebel operation. With their leader returned, the Sullustan Resistance and the Rebel Alliance resumed their diplomatic talks and quickly came to an agreement. While the Sullustans did not join the Alliance, they instead chose to ally with them as a separate entity, and provide support where and when it was needed. While it was perhaps not the most ideal outcome for the Rebel High Command, their collaborations would soon bear fruit, when the leadership of both organizations cooked up a plan to bring down Operation Strike Fear for good. The first step was to capture certain engineers from Cygnus Spaceworks, the manufacturers of the Lambda shuttle, and have them modify one of their own Lambda shuttles to imitate an Imperial equivalent in every conceivable way. As luck would have it, the engineers they required were overseeing a test flight of a new prototype starfighter Cygnus was developing for the Empire. As this was the testing site and not a military position of any significance, it was poorly protected as no one expected the rebels to attack and make away with the Cygnus engineers. Unfortunately for them. The second step was to secure a weapon of mass destruction from an Imperial freighter that had been recently damaged in a previous Rebel attack. Again, one quick hit and fade operation later, the Rebels had in their possession one large-scale device of immense destructive power. Now that all the pieces were in place, an infiltration mission was dispatched to the Invincible using the modified shuttle, where the rebels aboard would pretend to be just another shuttle on just another supply run to the Star Destroyer. Once aboard, they proceeded to unload their cargo, where their weapon of mass destruction was secretly stashed away inside one of their cargo containers. When they finished their delivery, the rebels would have to escape before the explosive device went off, which they did, with the resulting explosion of the not-so-invincible Invincible providing an awe-inspiring sight to the rebels aboard the fleeing shuttle. After all, it wasn't every day one saw a Star Destroyer explode right in front of them. But aside from the jokes that could be made about the Empire naming one of their Star Destroyers the Invincible when it clearly wasn't, this was a very important victory for the Rebel Alliance for two main reasons. First, they had defeated Operation Strike Fear. While the Empire would never stop hunting the rebels now, they had defeated the first major concentrated effort the Imperial Navy set against them. Second, they blew up a Star Destroyer, which was an achievement that added legitimacy to the rebel cause and could potentially result in increased support throughout the civilized worlds. The Galactic Empire was far from defeated, but this was an important first step for the men, women, and other sentients of the Rebel Alliance. But Operation Strike Fear was only the first step in the Galactic Empire's plan to solidify their control over the galaxy.